Hey everyone, surprise. I'm doing a second episode. I just decided to do it after I recorded this last solo episode. So we'll see if I release them together or if we release them like once a week. Um, because I didn't think I was going to record this, but the champagne's flowing. I'm feeling kind of talky. And this has just been like really heavy on my mind this past week. And I just really am getting the pull that like I have to talk about it. So I know that I put a poll out on our Instagram of what people wanted to hear from me. Either the 33 things I've learned throughout life or my journey with spirituality. It was almost dead even. And so we're just going to talk about spirituality in this episode. I also mentioned in the last episode, there's a lot of people in my life right now that are struggling with this subject. And I think that's why I'm so pulled to talk about it. It's also something that I really been diving into in therapy, and I've made a lot of aha moments with it. So I feel like it's just something that I need to talk about right now. And even if I don't end up releasing this episode, it is very therapeutic for me to just like talk and like word vomit, get all my feelings out. So I have no structure to this episode. I'll just full on say that because I was not planning on doing it. So it's really going to all be coming from my heart, and it's just going to be me talking. So sorry in advance. I'll re-listen. If it sucks, we just won't even release it. But I'm not going to deny the pull that I have to talk about it. So journey with spirituality. This is a very interesting subject. I do want to preface before I start any of this. I am not meaning to offend anybody. If you are a part of the LDS church, these are all my opinion. I'm not trying to offend you. I'm not trying to be rude. It does tend to be a subject that gets me a little bit heated sometimes. So again, those are all my feelings, all my emotions, all my opinions, nothing that I am trying to hurt or be mean or degrading, any of that. I'm going to try to keep it very respectful, but I know, especially if you're part of the church, a lot of my views you're not going to agree with. And again, it's okay to agree to disagree. I want everybody to know that I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not any of that. I'm just speaking from experience, speaking from my heart. So here we go. Let's take a sip of champagne. Let me cough. Okay, here we are. So, spirituality. If you are not from Utah, LDS Church, Latter-day Saints, Mormons, whatever you would like to be called, or you would like to call them. I think like the most proper term right now that the Mormon Church is using is the Latter-day Saints of the Church of Jesus Christ or something. That's too much for me to say. I have a list. It's too hard to say, to be completely honest. Too many words in one sentence. So I'm going to I kind of go between LDS and Mormon. So again, not trying to offend anybody. It's just easier to say. So, okay. So that's what LDS is. That is what Mormon is. It is a religion. It is the very prominent religion in the state of Utah. Utah, I would say, is probably like the Mormon capital of the world. Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot of Mormons here. It's a very unique way of life in Utah. It's very hard to live in Utah. It's very hard to be in your 30s with no kids, not going to church in Utah. It's hard. It's hard to live in Utah. And I know that not all Mormons outside of the state of Utah are not like Utah Mormons. I've heard that countless times. I also have family that lives out of the state. And so I've seen that Mormons in other states are different. Utah Mormons are kind of a different breed and very judgmental. Most of them are very judgmental. And it's very hard being a female who was in the church, who left the church, and now is in their 30s, doesn't go to church, and doesn't have kids. It is something I battle almost every single day. I have fully removed my records from the church. I did not get excommunicated or any of that. I just chose to remove my records. I did not want any part of it through the things that I have learned in my life. So yeah, I'm no longer a member, and I don't want to be. I will never be a member ever again. I am very sure of that. And yeah, so I grew up in this religion. For as long as I can remember, I never connected with it, but I felt like I had to connect with it. I also know my mom listens to this podcast, so I also want to give the disclaimer, like, Mom, none of this was ever your fault. I don't blame you for any of this. Um, yeah, I know that, like, she may take some things to heart, and I don't blame her for any of this. I don't blame, my family, my grandparents, any of that. It just is the way that the religion is in Utah. So for as long as I can remember, I just never connected with it. I remember sitting in primary and getting told, like, this is the only true church, blah, blah, blah. And like, it never made sense to me. I was like, how is this the only true church on this entire planet? Like, there's so many religions. How is this the only true church? And my questioning really, really started with something so silly. I look back now and I'm like, oh my God, this is really silly. But all of my friends in high school, I was in 10th grade, all of my friends were drinking coffee. And a part of the religion is the word of wisdom, and you can't drink coffee. And I wanted to drink coffee so bad. And back in this day, the coffee that was being drank in 10th grade was a vanilla bean frappuccino with extra whipped cream that you would get at Barnes and Noble or Target. You'd left school, go get your Starbucks and walk around Barnes and Noble or Target. And my best friend at the time, that was like what we did. We would slough school and go do these things. And I could never get the quote unquote coffee because it was from Starbucks. And I just remember being like, why can I not do this? Like, now I look back and I'm like, a vanilla bean frappuccino is literally blended ice cream. Like, there was no reason why I couldn't do it. But I was told that Starbucks was bad. And so it didn't matter. I didn't even know it was ice cream. I legitimately thought that it had coffee in it. It doesn't. And I wanted it so bad. And then as we became 16, my best friend started working at a place called European Connection, RIP, European Connection, miss your crepes every single day. And they sold coffee there. And she would always be drinking coffee, and I would go visit her at work to get a crepe, and I couldn't have the coffee with it. And it drove me nuts. So I started asking my friends who were in the church. She was not in the church. I had another group of friends that was. And I started asking them, like, what's the reason that we can't drink coffee? Like, I really want to drink coffee. And it was always the same answer. We don't know. We just aren't allowed. Okay, well, why? I'm a person that has to have a why behind things. And that is what really got me questioning things, which is so silly because there were so many other things that had happened before that should have got me questioning things, and they didn't. And so I don't know why coffee was like my breaking point, but I just don't like feeling controlled. I like to have freedom. And so started questioning things. Friends started judging me for sure, started being rude to me, started telling me, like, don't question things or go meet with the bishop, blah, 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 all about coffee. And I was like, come on, you guys, like, this is so silly. I mean, I was 16. I was thinking that I was an adult. So I was like, we're adults. We can have coffee if we want coffee, especially if we don't have a reason to not do it. So I really started questioning the church, and I just kind of started thinking back about my life in the church, and I just never, ever connected with it. And there's also been like a lot of situations that are kind of sketchy. One of the biggest that I remember is being right before I went into Young Women's, being a beehive, which you're like 14, 13, 14. And we had like an activity, and we all got a piece of paper and we wrote down qualities that we want in a spouse. And I remember thinking, like, this is so weird. Again, I had a boyfriend at this time, and I fully, like, your first love, you think that you're going to marry them, whatever. And so I just wanted to write down all the qualities that he had, because that's, I was 13. That's who I thought I was going to marry for sure. And all the girls were writing down, like, return missionary, holds the priesthood, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, I don't want any of those things. And like, temple worthy was what a lot of girls wrote as well. And mine was literally like, my boyfriend was tan, he was athletic, He rode dirt bikes. He was funny. He was blonde. Like those are the things I was writing down. And the other girls are writing down all this other stuff. And I was just like, this is so weird. Like I have never had a desire to go through the temple. Not one single time have I ever wanted to go through the temple. I thought it was strange. I did not want to wear garments. Like I just did not connect with that. But all these girls are writing these things down. So I was like, well, shit, I guess I have to add these things to my list or else like I'm going to look stupid. And so I created this idea in my mind that I had to strive for these things and I had to want these things. And I never did. I never did. And I felt so bad for not wanting those things. And I felt bad that the things I was writing down was that I wanted an athletic guy who rode dirt bikes. Like, hell, it's so silly. But, and then there were just like other things all growing up in Young Women's that like the girls would have to do certain activities and the boys could do funner things. And it was like, well, why can't the girls do that? Like one of our activities was to sew like skirts for girls camp or for trek or something stupid. And I was like, the boys are literally going like, why water rafting? Why do we have to sit here and sew? Like, I do not want to be Susie Homemaker when I grow up. This is so weird. So it was a bunch of like little things that I just would kind of ignore because I felt stupid. And as a teenager growing up in the church, my parents were the only parents that we were active in the church that hadn't been through the temple. And there were so many activities that like, there was one that like you would draw a picture of the temple that your parents got married in. Another one, like girls wanted to go to the different temples around Utah and take pictures in front of them and in like wedding looking dresses to give to their moms for Mother's Day and like stuff like that. And I was just like, I'm so out of place in this place. And like, these girls are my best friends. Like I grew up in a very, very close knit neighborhood and these girls are my best friends. And if I didn't fit in with them, like I wouldn't have any friends. And so I had to conform to this person that I didn't want to be. And with my parents not being sealed in the temple or never going through the temple, I was definitely an outcast of these activities and I could not participate because I didn't have anything to participate with. And so shortly, this caused big fights between me and my mom. Like I would try and blame it on something else, but the root cause of it was that I was mad that she had never gone through the temple, which is ridiculous. Now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, Taylor, you were so naive and so dumb. But right after this whole coffee thing happened and I really like was questioning things and thinking about things, like my wheels were turning in my brain, me and my mom got in this giant fight. And I remember distinctly, I don't even know if she remembers this, but we got in this fight and I used to babysit her best friend's son before I turned 16 and like was able to get a job. And we were driving home one day and we were in this giant fight and it was about the temple. And I remember the exact road that we were on. Like I remember it so vividly. And she was like, Taylor, I need you to just take a breath for a second. And I want you to think of Jesus and God that you have learned about. Do you really think that we are going to be judged, that me and your dad are going to be judged because we haven't been through a building? Like, why are we fighting about this? It doesn't need to be fought about. Like, do you really think? And there was this guy that her best friend knew that like was covered in tattoos and like smoke and drink, but he did this giant toy drive every Christmas for kids who couldn't have a Christmas. And she brought him up as well. And she's like, do you really think that when he dies, God is going to look at him and be like, you did wonderful things for children throughout your life, but you're covered head to toe in tattoos. So I'm sorry, like you never get to see your family again. And she was just like, come on, like think about it a little bit harder before you get so angry about this. And that was really a giant turning point in my life with religion and spirituality, because I was like, she's absolutely right, which I would never have told her that at 15 years old because I was an asshole. But in my head, I was like, she's exactly right. He wouldn't, like the God and Jesus that I have learned about is not going to be as judgmental as the LDS church is telling me that they're going to be, that he's going to be, because we haven't been through the temple. And so it just really, really got me thinking. And there was also like a situation with the bishop. So again, I had a boyfriend when I was 13. Okay, I was a baby. 13-year-olds back in the day were not like the 13-year-olds nowadays. We did not have sex. We did not like make out. Like we held hands and we kissed, peck on the lips. Like it was nothing like what teenagers are experiencing nowadays. And it was not a bad relationship at all. Like we were not doing anything inappropriate in any way, shape, or form. And there was one activity that we were going to the temple to do baptisms for the dead, and had to like get a temple recommend. And the bishop at the time was the dad of one of the girls that was my age. That was not a very nice girl. And I was nice to her. I would invite her to all my birthday parties. Like I would hang out with her. And she didn't like me. She was friends with my bully growing up. They were really good friends. And that definitely transitioned into her absolutely hating me for no reason. And so in turn, her dad hated me as well. And the kid that was my boyfriend was the hot kid in the neighborhood that like everyone wanted to be with, blah, blah, blah. And he would choose me half of the time. Whenever it was convenient for him, I was his girlfriend. And so that really bugged a lot of girls. Even though he was a complete and total asshole to me, it bugged a lot of the girls. And so I think that played a big part in it. But anyways, I was in this interview with the bishop to get my temple recommend. And he asked me about the law of chastity. And I said, yes, I follow the law of chastity, which the law of chastity is basically like you don't have sex, you don't do anything inappropriate with the opposite sex. And I was probably 14 or 15 at this time. And I really wasn't doing anything bad. Like truly, I would own up to it now if I had, like we were truly, it was a very young, innocent type of relationship, nothing inappropriate. And so like I said that, I was like, yes, I follow the law of chastity. And he was like, well, are you sure? I was like, yes, I am positive that I follow the law of chastity. And he wouldn't drop it. He would not let it go. And so he kept asking me like the same questions over and over again. And then he was like, I'm going to explain the law of chastity to you. And I was like, okay, like I know what it is. I was working on getting my young woman's medallion at the time. Part of that was studying this book, Pamphlet of Youth or something weird like that. And it heavily goes into the law of chastity in there. So I knew what it was about. And he just would not let it go. And I was getting so frustrated and so angry. I remember at some point I asked him, I said, can my mom please come in here with me? And he told me no. And I was like, well, I'm not comfortable. Like, I don't want to be in here with you asking the same question over and over again. And clearly you're not believing me, even though I'm being honest. Like, I would really just like my mom to be in here. And at that point, after like I expressed how uncomfortable I was, he was like, well, the interview's over, but I just don't think that you're worthy to go to the temple right now. And he refused to give me my temple recommend. And so I had to go to my young women's leaders and I had to say like, Bishop wouldn't give me my temple recommend, so I can't go on this activity with you guys, which was so embarrassing and so heartbreaking for me because I felt like I was doing something wrong, even though I wasn't. Having a quote unquote, I wouldn't even call it a relationship now looking back, but back at that time, I fully thought it was like a functional relationship and blah, blah, blah. And I feel like that's a very normal part of life. And kids should not be shamed for living a normal part of life that when we weren't doing anything bad. And so it was very embarrassing. And yeah, all of this stuff kind of happened around like the same time within the same like 2 to 3 years. But when you're questioning things, you just get told like either put it on a shelf or have faith or whatever it may be. And just don't question it. Like have faith that you're doing the right thing. And it never connected. It never connected. So when I met Tony, I was dating a missionary and again, never wanted to go through the temple. That had never been a goal of mine. I literally had never wanted to do it. And I agreed to quote unquote wait for this missionary. And right before he left, I was like, actually, I don't feel like I really necessarily want to fully wait for you. Like I'm in just kind of like this weird transitional phase. I'm wanting to leave the church. I don't want the same things as you. Like, let's just wait until you're back and then we'll see like where we're at, and we can maybe go from there, like see where we're at in life when you get back, and then we'll see what happens. And he wouldn't really take that as an answer, I would say. And so I felt bad, and I thought I never thought that I fully loved him, but I liked him. And so I was like, and again, it was what I thought I had to do. I thought that this is what I was supposed to do in life, because I had been conditioned to believe that that is what you're supposed to do. And even if you didn't want it, I wouldn't be worthy to go to the celestial kingdom or heaven, in other words, if I didn't do these things. So I ended up waiting for him. And then I got his first letter after he had left, and it was talking about going through the temple and getting married in the temple. And I freaked out. I was like, I do not want this in life. Like, I don't want this. And this is heavily when I was transitioning from leaving the church. I was really questioning things. I had lost a lot of friends. I had changed friend groups. Like, I started drinking my vanilla bean frappuccinos, my blended vanilla ice cream. And I was really, really questioning things. I started swearing. I started saying the F word, like all of these things. And I freaked out. And that's when I wrote him a Dear John letter and met Tony within that same week. So it turned into a giant thing that it looked like I was cheating on him with Tony, even though he just hadn't got the letter yet. Like, again, wish that I could redo that part of my life, but I can't. So, but it really was just because I was not wanting the same goals in life that he did. So that led me to fully leaving the church when I was 18 years old. And I forever am grateful for my dad, and especially my mom, because it is a very hard thing to leave the church. And I do not want to take that lightly at all, because it is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my entire life. And my parents were so supportive. It was never a fight. It was never like, you have to do this, blah, blah, blah. They were so supportive. And I will forever be grateful for that, because one of the people that I know that's leaving the church right now, she just told her parents this last week, and they are not being supportive. And it's heartbreaking to her. And I truly thank my parents so much for being so supportive with that. So after I left the church, I felt like I had this newfound sense of freedom. I felt like I could do whatever I wanted, like I had no rules. And that led me into my early 20s, which were very heavy party and drinking years, smoking disgusting hookah, which barf, can't believe I even did that. And yeah, if I wasn't in a relationship, I probably would have slept around just because I could. And it really led me down the complete opposite path in regards to alcohol and partying. And, I partied a lot. I drank a lot of alcohol, which I feel like in any other state is normal when you turn 20, 21. I feel like that is a normal part of life, but for Utah, it really isn't. And so I just felt like I had all this freedom, and I just wanted to explore and do things that I didn't do in high school, and just like live life to the fullest. And that also in turn led me to believe in absolutely nothing. I did not believe in God. I did not believe in Jesus. I would borderline say I was atheist, because I just was like, my entire life has been a lie. I've always been super interested in history, and exploring the Mormon church history is something that really, really opens your eyes, and it's very shocking. And yeah, once I explored the church history, I was like, okay, like this is not what I grew up believing. Like, this is actually everything, most things was a complete and total lie or a fabrication of the truth. And so that led me to just believe in nothing. And it wasn't until my blood clot happened in 2018 that I even explored the possibility of any type of spirituality in my life. And that was because I thought I was dying one night. And I remember praying for the first time in, I don't even know how many years. And I prayed how I was taught to pray. And I just remember laying in the hospital bed and begging begging God to let me walk out of that hospital room with both of my legs and seeing my niece and my nephew grow up, being with Tony, getting married to Tony. Like I was so specific in that prayer. And I actually felt comfort from that, which was very shocking because I was so doped up on pain medication that it was just like, whatever, like, I just need some sort of comfort. And it was very comforting. And so I was like, maybe there is something else out there. Yeah, so that's really what opened up my eyes to even being spiritual again. And then going through my whole yoga journey and my yoga teacher certification is what really solidified the beliefs that I have today in things, which we'll get into a little bit later. But as I've been going through therapy, I've been very open with my fear of death and how I don't know how to handle grief. And as I was driving home from Moab last weekend, I think a lot in the car. And Moab is a very long drive from Cache Valley, Utah. So I had a lot of time in the car and it was bad weather. And so it took even longer. Like I had a lot of time to figure things out. So I was driving and thinking, and I had the biggest aha moment that I was like, I know, because my therapist has been asking me for a long time, like, where do you think this fear of death comes from? What are you afraid of? And it was always just like, I'm afraid of the unknown. I don't know what happens after death. Like, I'm just afraid of the unknown. And it really hit me. I'm like, so terrified of death because what the Mormon church teaches about death, I never connected with. And it's scary to me to not know what happens because what if it is true? And what if I just turn my back on it when it is true? And if you don't know, the Mormon church believes in 3 separate kingdoms and then an outer darkness. So it's, let's see if I can remember, celestial, telestial, and terrestrial. And then I think an outer darkness, or maybe the terrestrial is the outer darkness, which is essentially hell. I don't know. But that's what they teach. And if you're not married in the temple, follow all the commandments, follow the word of wisdom, you don't get into the celestial kingdom, which is essentially a heaven. And that was horrifying to me. I also learned in primary, young ass kid, about the second coming. And it was horrifying. Like I literally still to this day have nightmares about the second coming. And people talking about like all the crazy things that happen in the world right now, and blah, blah, blah. And like people will say like, oh, Jesus is coming. The end of times is coming. And that gives me such bad anxiety because I was such a young child hearing about the second coming and how when Jesus comes, if you're not worthy, any tattoos you have will be burned off of your body. Piercings will fall out. If you're not worthy, you'll burst into flames when Jesus comes. Like, all of these crazy things that no child should ever be told. It is a form of brainwashing to me, and it has severely impacted me throughout my entire life, learning about death through the Mormon church, because I never felt worthy in the church because I didn't want the things that made you worthy. And so it's terrifying. And so that was like a giant aha moment on my drive home that I was like, holy shit, this is where that fear stemmed from. So this last week in therapy, I told him, I was like, I'm so excited. Like as soon as I walked in the room, I was like, I'm so excited to tell you, I finally figured out where my fear of death came from. And that really led us into the discussion about religion and about spirituality. And it's very interesting because I mentioned before on this podcast, I firmly believe that trauma presents itself to you when you're ready to deal with it. And all the things around you are going to be showing you that you are ready to deal with it. So I have a lot of people in my life that are transitioning away from the church. I have the doctor I work with, 2 doctors that I work with, and a coworker, and they are in the midst of leaving the church. And in turn, that has led to some really great conversations, hearing an adult perspective of finding out that the things that they were taught their whole life aren't true, or the truth is stretched or fabricated, and just seeing their struggles and hearing their struggles and the things that they're struggling with. It's been very interesting. And it's very interesting that all of this is happening right now because I didn't know how deep my trauma went with the church. I had no idea until this last week in therapy. And I made so many connections. And it's been something that's been underneath the surface for a really long time. This has been a podcast episode that I've wanted to do for a really, really long time. And Shelby and me just keep saying, like, oh, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. And I think that's why I had just such a strong pull to record it tonight, because I learned so much this last week that I feel like I just have to share. And yeah, it's just been a very interesting journey to not realize how traumatic the church was. I've had a lot of anger towards it and towards the people in it, which isn't fair to the people. But it's been really hard to hear people throughout my life be like, oh, I wish I could do this, but I can't because this religion says I can't. And it's silly to me because I want to be like, well, you're an adult. You can create your life how you want to create it. And if you want to have a beer, or if you want to have a coffee, or if you want to skip out on a temple night, just because you're not feeling like you want to go, you should be able to do that. And that's okay. And yeah, so it's just really interesting how life is playing out right now. So I had that really big aha moment, went to therapy, told my therapist about it, and we really dove in. And I think the biggest thing that I have learned is, even though I do consider myself spiritual right now, I do have a lot of reservations, and it creates anxiety. It creates fear in my life around anything to do with the spirituality. My tarot cards have been saying for probably close to a year that I need to embrace the spiritual side of myself. I need to embrace my intuition and all of those things. And I keep ignoring it. I keep ignoring it. And I really think it's because I have a lot of trauma there that I have to work through. One of the biggest things that I discovered this last week, besides where my fear of death stemmed from, is I have just never felt worthy. I've never felt enough. I remember growing up and preparing to get baptized, and you get told, like, you're going to get the Holy Ghost, you're going to get the gift of the Holy Ghost, blah, blah, blah. And throughout like girls camp and every Sunday at church, like, people bear their testimony, and they would talk about these insane spiritual experiences they had listening to the Holy Ghost. And I never had felt that. And the day I got baptized, I remember going to bed that night and sitting in bed and being like, all right, Holy Ghost, like, saying my prayers, like, I'm ready for you. Talk to me. Let me listen. Let me do this. And I never felt that spiritual connection ever growing up. Now it caused me anxiety because I never would want to bear my testimony because I had nothing to say. I couldn't get up in girls camp and bear my testimony and be like, oh, the Holy Ghost talked to me this weekend while we were here, and this was such a spiritual thing, because it wasn't. Like, that would be a complete lie on my end. And it was hard. It was so hard growing up with that, because I felt like I wasn't worthy to get this gift that everybody talked about that they had. And I was like, well, what is wrong with me? Is it because I don't want to go through the temple? Is it because I don't want to marry a returned missionary? Is it because I don't believe in the priesthood? Like, what is it that I don't get this? And so my therapist is a therapist that deals with grief as well as leaving the LDS church. So it's so interesting that I even found him, because when I was changing therapists, he was the first person that popped up, and it's exactly what I needed. And he used to be a member of the church, and he left the church as well. And with it being Utah and such a big thing, he's like, this is really the things that, like, I wanted to specialize in. And with leaving the church comes a way of not knowing how to handle grief, because everything that you've been taught is a lie. And so when he broke it down, he's like, without, like, removing the thought of the Holy Ghost, why can't your intuition be the quote unquote Holy Ghost? Because my intuition, my spirit guides talk to me all the time. All the time. And a lot of times I'll just ignore it because I'm like, whatever, like, this is too weird, or I'm not into it, because I do have those boundaries and those reservations up around anything spiritual, because I feel like it's wrong, even though it's not. So what my beliefs are right now is I heavily believe in souls. And I heavily believe in energies. And so, and like spirit guides, and I don't even know what to call them. Not ghosts, but like ghosts, like spirits or energies around, or souls around, whatever it may be. This is still something that I'm heavily exploring and really dialing down the things that I believe in. But the thing that feels comfortable to me and doesn't make me want to throw up is souls and spirits and spirit guides and intuition and energy. Everything in life has energy or vibration. And why can that not be God? Why can that not be God if you go to brunch with your girlfriends and you have a great day and you come home and you're feeling on top of the world and you're feeling happy? Why can that not be a spiritual experience? Or why can my yoga classes not be a spiritual experience? Like my yoga practice is so, so sacred and so spiritual to me. Teaching or private practices, I have had the most beautiful experiences in my entire life in a yoga setting. And so that's my religion, or that's my spiritual side, is it comes out in yoga and it comes out in teaching people. And that can be God. Spending time with my nieces and nephews is something that makes me so incredibly happy and gives me that feeling of like being on top of the world, or being freaking obnoxious with my sisters. That's a spiritual thing to me. So he really like had me break down things that I feel spiritual about. And those are the things that I came up with, is like normal everyday things. I don't need a building to have those things in my life. I need me, and I need the universe, and I need to trust my intuition. I need to trust myself. I need to trust the universe. And that can be my Holy Ghost moment. So it's kind of all jumbled and all over the place, because it is still something that I'm really processing, and something I for sure am going to be talking about more, because I do feel like it is something that's very needed right now. The LDS Church is in a very, very big transitional phase. A lot of people are leaving. And I do think some sort of a downfall is going to be happening with this religion at some point in our lifetime. And as much of an asshole as it makes me, I'm here for it, because I can see the trauma and the sadness in people's lives when they're questioning it and when they're leaving. And the conversations that I've had with the people that are leaving are so sad. And I feel for them, because I know how it feels. It is so hard. And I was young. I did not go through the temple. I did not go on a mission. All of those things, that brings a whole different level that they're going through right now. And it's hard. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do in your life, but you'll know what's right. And I also do want to say, if the church feels right to you, and if your spirituality feels right for you, and I'm never going to dog anybody's beliefs. I am not going to say like, oh, you shouldn't believe in that. That's weird, blah, blah, blah. If you are questioning, yes, let's have a healthy conversation and let's talk about it, or whoever you trust to talk about it. But I'm not going to say like, oh, this is wrong, you shouldn't believe in that. If it's comfortable for you, it should be what you do. I think everybody's spiritual journey should be their own. I don't think that they should base it on anybody else. I don't think they should base it on their family or their spouse or their parents or siblings or neighbors. I think spirituality is something that is very private and personal to each individual person. And you don't have to believe in what everyone else believes in. Some people may look at the stuff I believe in and be like, a spirit guide, are you kidding me? That's weird as shit. That's okay. I believe in it. I've had experiences with my spirit guides that I know that they're there, and that's okay. I've had experiences with my dad that I know he's still around, and that's okay. And I'm not going to make anybody believe what I believe in. And that's another big problem I have with the church, is if you question anything, they try and change your mind. I have always known my entire life that it wasn't. for me, that a lot of parts of it weren't true. And I just went along with the game because I felt like I had to. And I felt like that's what I was supposed to be doing. And it wasn't. It wasn't for me. It's caused a lot of trauma and a lot of fear in my life that I didn't even realize that I had. And exploring that and realizing that I have that is quite the experience. And it's only been a week that I've really dove into it. And I just uncovered so many things this last week in my therapy session that I just can't believe. Like, I connected so many things and healed so many things of my past self and of my inner child. And I'm really excited to go more down this journey to like figure out more stuff, because the things that I have learned, especially the fear of death, has been such a trial for me the last few years. And to really figure out where the root of it came from is where the healing really begins. So sorry again, this episode's all over the place and not one that I was planning on recording. So we will definitely revisit this again. I also really want Shelby to share her story of how she left the church and kind of where her spiritual life is right now. Because I know that we have a lot of differences as well. And I think it's just a topic that is really, really needed right now. I don't know why the church is going through this giant transition in so many people's lives right now, but I know that it's a thing, and I know that it's hard, and I know that you're not alone, because Shelby and I have been through it. And yeah, it's a hard journey, but I'm excited to just explore this side of myself a little bit more and get to a place that I'm not absolutely terrified of spirituality and absolutely terrified of death. So anyways, that's all I'm going to share right now, because it's 11 o'clock at night and I've been recording for a really long time, it feels like, and I've hardly even drank my second glass of champagne, and that's really sad. So if you enjoyed this episode, or if you have any comments, if you want to talk about anything, please let us know. Follow us on Instagram at Champs Drink Champs Podcast, on TikTok at Champs Drink Champs Pod. Give us 5-star review, a review, I meant to say. And yeah, anyways, we'll see if this episode even gets released, but if it does, thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.